Welcome to New Babbage's rebroadcast of UEE Span Radio. Now, we have some exciting highlights from a young upstart developer, CIG, coming right across the verse. Let's get right into it.
What solutions have you come up with to mitigate the roving overdose death squads?
If you've played the latest PTU patch, you will notice that we have disabled the use of the multi-tool tractor beam and the medical gun and the dedicated medical gun and the other med pens to be able to target other players. So that will mitigate or will remove the the scenario that has been described with the roving overdose squads. We sat down and discussed this, myself, Todd, Tony, Chris, about how we wanted to handle it for 3.15 and going forward. Obviously, the ultimate goal is to have green zones be, that you can get anything out. We're not arbitrarily stopping you from doing those things. And then there are mechanisms in place, whether that is AI guards, security, to be able to resolve that.
So the intention for right now, for 3.15, for the immediate future,
is the same as 3.14.
Is to disable the medi guns and all the medi pens and inside green zones, but also to make it so that if you die,
just to be clear, that's to disable it on other people.
You
can still use it. Yeah, so you can still get the gun out, you can still get the med pens out and use them on yourself. We're just disabling it, being able to use it on other people.
Gotcha. And then if you die inside a green zone, you don't lose your material, just in case you. We got a question coming up later about the various falls and stuff like that can occur.
I know when I'm playing Star Citizen, this has been a problem lately, where there has been exploits basically by players, or you could call it fair game, depends on how you view things, where they are using medical drugs to knock you out and then take items. This has not been a problem for me in a major way because I've literally just not been using subscriber concierge items. However, in green zones, that really should have some type of recourse. The security staff are not ready, so they are offering disabling of the medical supplies on other players until it is ready to come to prime time, where there are consequences for someone's actions. This fix is now live on PTU, so if you are in Wave 1 or Wave 2, rest easy. You can use your equipment without fear in the green zones. But the key word, remember, is in the green zones. If you die with equipment outside of the green zones, you will likely lose it, unless it's like due to a 30k or something, and we'll get more into server restores later. But just for now, green zones are safe.
Forward, absolutely yes. We want org members and other players to be able to access inventories and share things. With the current implementation of local inventory, the answer is no. So that is on a per person inventory. So if I go onto a ship and you're on, and it's your ship, Jared, I can open up the ship inventory and it will only be my ship inventory. And if you open up the ship inventory, it will only be your ship inventory. But local inventory, as I've said, I think on multiple ISCs and SCLive before, local inventory is a placeholder solution until we have true physical inventory, which will be lockers, compartments, weapon racks, cargo hold, so on and so forth. And that will be accessible by any player.
This underscores that the inventory system that you see on your ship, as he noted, was constantly in flux, where each player has their own setup. Where Rich said, look, we want it to be where each cupboard means something, and the weapon locker is already set up as such, where it's real weapons physically in there. But the bag of holding that the ship is right now will not be something that is just one player, and the cargo will be visualized. The storage areas like suit lockers and such, and they're going to go more in depth about suit lockers, where you can do outfits that are like customized just to the person, etc., where it's like a whole setup from every piece of it in just a little bit. But that is a good important thing to remember. You and only you can access your inventory. But remember, the ship has to be protected. If the ship is destroyed, that is another problem. But for now, at least only you can access your inventory on your ship. And as a reminder, your inventory on your ship is not your universal inventory. It's a big change of thought where your home area will have all your stuff, and unless you take that stuff and you put it in that ship's bag of holding, so to speak, or on its weapon rack, it is not coming with you. It will not be available to you when you need it on the side of a moon. Just remember that.
We can't transport ship components via the new physical inventory system. So outfitting each ship with higher grade shields and quantum drives tends to be a very painful process. Why is this?
The short answer, and I'll give a long answer to give at least some expositions. The short answer is because inventory is larger than just one pillar or one team, and to have all of that aspect to the ship side, which is kind of all like physicalized cargo and things like that, we weren't able to deliver it all at once. So that's the short answer. The long answer is that there is going to be an intention that we move away, like we did with the PMA, to the Inner Thought inventory system, that we'll be moving away from the VMA towards more like a hangar management app. And that hangar management app then allows you to manage all of your items and gear within the hangar, and including that's where you then go and go, I want to take my repeater or laser cannon or whatever out of storage and put it onto a ship, and then NPCs would come out essentially and do that. So essentially they're two kind of separate systems in terms of the vehicle management and the player management, the personal management, and essentially there is a gray area in between where this is the pitfalls of working on a live game, that not everything always aligns up due to just amount of work.
Right.
And this is one of those cases where, okay, in the short term, it might be a more painful process, but it's moving us closer to the final goal of where we want to be.
I get where they're going with this, and I find it interesting that they made it clear that you'll be able to pull out the app and ask for the item to literally appear out of your, I'm guessing, the cargo elevator, and then NPCs will walk over to your ship basically and mount it there for you. But then it opens up another can of worms. Will players be able to do it themselves with, say, the tractor beam, or what they'll later be revealed, the two-handed tractor beam that they have, which is a more advanced one, and put it on themselves if they don't want to pay NPCs? Or are these NPCs are literally working for free on behalf of the spaceport by you renting your space or owning a hangar later on? Will you just have these NPCs as part of your fees to like own the place or rent the place? Is you're paying the staff to kind of wander in and out?
3.15, we just got knickknacks. In regards to knickknacks, what happens to items that get stolen by another player? Does it still show up on the original player's app, or does it get moved to the new players list?
So it gets moved to the news players list. There's still lots of questions that we need to resolve on our end.
Right.
But just to be clear, for 3.15, somebody loots your subscriber items, that player will take them, but they will not remove from your account. So come 3.16, they will be re-entitled to you.
So as a reminder, this is alpha. This is PTU in specific. Every patch, you'll get your stuff back. However, when 3.15 goes live, you may lose your subscriber concierge items if you're running around with them and die, and they're stolen if you don't go back for them, etc. But you will get them back. There is no permanent loss whatsoever, and in future patches, they will have mechanisms in place to help you get them back without having to wait for the next patch to kick or a character reset.
It is still on. I actually got an update today from one of the engineers, and it is something that we want to do to try and help. It's basically the gravestone in other games, right? That you can go back and find it. Obviously, your body is still there, so if you do remember where you did die, then you should be able to go back and retrieve it. But we're trying to add a marker, whether it makes it to 3.15 or not.
So they're going to attempt to have beacons in the game to help you find your body if you pass, and that should help you go recover your gear. They're not quite sure if it's going to fit in 3.15, but it will be in the future if not.
So, interestingly, the reason why you die is because you take massive amounts of physics damage. It's the same with ramps, it's the same with trolleys, and the way that the down state works, and I think I described this in one of the ICs, is that if you take more damage than your entire health bar, essentially times 2, you go past downed and straight to dead. So essentially, if you get shot with an Idris railgun, you're dead. There's no like, oh, I managed to survive for a little bit and somebody can rescue me. It's like, no, you go straight to jail. You know, you die straight away. Whereas if you only take a certain amount of damage, you go to downed. So in the cases here where you're dying because you're falling down the stairs or a trolley's hit you or something to do with a tractor beam, it's generally because something's gone wrong and you've taken a significant amount of physics damage because you've intersected something. Do you remember you see old games like Hitman or whatever, where the ragdoll would get like stuck and then just explode into the air? It's because there's been, you know, a physics collision.
Taking 1 point of damage 1,000 times in a second.
Exactly, and that's basically what's happened.
This is something they're going to continue to fight. They mentioned all the way back in the original Arena Commander days, they had problems. I can remember even in the Hangar app having PTVs that would blow up and go crazy due to these physics damage. It's interesting to hear that explanation. If you watch the whole video, you'll hear more interesting discussion and tidbits, like the flashlight, I think it was in the Arena Commander they mentioned. The gist is this is an ongoing issue. They are fighting it every time. They are trying to fix these things, but I wouldn't expect it to go away tomorrow. It's just that simple. But it will get better and better over time.
You mentioned server crash recovery, so let's hit that. What is server crash recovery for those who don't know? I know this is a bit outside your wheelhouse, but you're the one who's here today. So what is server crash recovery, and why does it matter for 3.15?
So in a nutshell, if the server goes down, previously when you log back on, you would have to request your ship to come back, the ASOP terminals, and essentially you'd be given a brand new ship. It wouldn't be the ship that you were currently flying around with. So anything that you had on there, like cargo, would be gone. So with server crash recovery, what happens is essentially we run heartbeats to determine essentially the state of your ship. And essentially if the server then goes down, when you request your ship, when you log back on, it will actually be the ship that was recorded at the previous heartbeat. So you would actually get the ship back, and probably in 99% of the cases, it would be the ship that you were just flying.
This is an exciting thing. I've heard many people that are into trading, that are into basically anything in the game, discuss that we can't even log out on our bed safely. How can we play this game long term, especially if we don't want to live in the cities or the stations? And also for criminals to have that element where they're basically trapped in Grim Hex if there's problems. There's nowhere else in the entire system that's safe in all of Stanton. Finally, the back to the actual topic of being able to heartbeat if you have a 30K or something and restore. And the reason I combine those things is because I see them as all interloping. If you can't trust your bed when you log back in that you're going to be in the ship that you left exactly the way it was, it's the same as if you crash, you need to be able to trust your ship as exactly the way it was when you come back in. Now, as I understand it, this basic crash system, I have yet to get it to work. To even attempt to get it to, I have not had a 30K yet. But I've, to be fair, I only played a couple hours on the latest PTU patch. But from what I've heard from at least one person, they said that all the stuff just basically was put back in their inventory, and then the ship was in the ASOP. So I don't know what to base that on because it's only one person's account, but that's the gist. Now, in the future, as I understand it, it's going to be where you can spawn the ship again, and it will be exactly the way you left it. Now, the heartbeats are only every few minutes, and that can change over time. If you listen to the whole interview, they get very dodgy about specifics about that, but the best way to put it is exactly how they called it, a quick save, essentially. It's a
what kind of changes happen to planets? There have been some notable changes to the weather and the surface of multiple planets and moons, and it would be rad to get more info, this person says.
So essentially there's been some tech changes in the background, which caused some changes in the distribution in some of the biomes. So they've slightly changed. We are aware that some biomes are missing some of the elements, but the art team are working feverishly to try and get some of those back.
A lot of time at Kleischer. Right now in Kleischer, a broken leg is pretty much a death sentence. What are we doing? I know prison healthcare isn't the best, but what are we doing about that?
Yes. I think for 3.15, there's not much we will be doing in terms of if you do get an injury in prison, which is unfortunate. The one thing is that we will eventually add medical facilities to the prison. As we do, if you can see now, for example, where we've linked the space station to the landing zone, because not all landing zones have a hospital. We've had to basically create a few stopgap solutions for us to solve those problems. But the goal is to add medical facilities in all locations you would expect medical facilities to be added.
I gotta say, I did not know about the planetary changes. I did not realize there was missing biomes or certain things of the biomes. I also did not realize that if you broke a leg in Kletcher, that was a major problem. I can proudly say I don't spend too much time in prison, thankfully. But this is an interesting development. So it might be better to just idle inside your room than try to speed the process up, go mining or something, unless the place is empty and devoid of other players. Because when you're in those caverns, things can happen. Also, the rocks alone, when you go mining, could explode and hurt you. I did not realize that was an issue. Sounds like that they're not ready for that in 3.15, unfortunately.
Will there be tweaks made to fit armor weaponry into backpacks?
So the goal of the inventory right now is to make sure that it's a believable system in terms of the actual volume and items that you can fit within that space. So, for example, if you've got a 120-liter backpack, the description I always give is that and I think I've said this on one of our shows before, is like, I can't fit the snooker cue in there in terms of because it's so long, but if I put it through a wood chipper, I would be able to fit the volume in there. So we take into account the item dimensions and the volume. The intention right now is that, you can either body drag those enemies back to your ship, or you can tractor beam. I'm not sure many people have been using the tractor beam, but you can actually tractor beam dead bodies. Oh. You can tractor beam a dead body back to your ship and then loot it that way. We do want to offer other abilities down the line, other features that are around that, whether that's hover trolley or whatever that you can take out and then load up and then take in. It's the old Ultima Online pack horse. But right. Yeah, that's the a further iteration on to the iteration we have now.
I gotta say, I did not think of looting gear off of downed NPCs by using tractor beams to just literally take the entire NPC onto the ship and then loot them there. I did not think of that. That's very clever. I think the trolleys could not come sooner, and I love the idea that he specifically said hover trolleys, like we've already discussed with physics. Trolleys are very difficult with their little wheels, and they're difficult to get over terrain, especially uneven terrain that could be on the side of a moon, of an asteroid, or wherever you're operating. Or even if you're operating in the vacuum of space from a downed ship that you're looting. He mentioned Ultima Online, but I think it's more like the first episode of Firefly, where they have their little collection of loot that they're pushing through from the wreck over to back to their ship. I think of something that you're going to need to think in 3 dimensions here in all directions. Very interesting stuff, though. The tractor beam is a nice stopgap, and it will help out with things.
But how do we prevent players from logging out and reconnecting to avoid losing items?
That's a really good question. So what we want to do is essentially what we did with the ships, where if somebody logs out, that if somebody's around you and still fighting you or whatever, that your character persists for a certain amount of time. A lot of MMOs do that. It's either
this is the eternal MMO question right here.
Yeah, so that's what we want to do, that you persist for a certain amount of time, and then so you basically exploit the system to get away. We're looking into that essentially to see what we can do in the meantime. So we are looking into a way of doing that. Whether it makes 3.15 or not will be dependent on bugs and other factors.
Are there any super duper rare items in the loot boxes? I know there are things in loot boxes that you can't find in stores.
There are things in loot boxes that shouldn't be in loot boxes, as well as things in loot boxes that you can't find in stores.
Fair enough.
Loot boxes, right now, I don't think there is anything super duper rare. But this is just the T0 of loot boxes. The loot boxes generally, I mean, I think people are having, I think when we did Evo, the people were getting squadron items and flares, and the intention is that you should be able to find rarer things in the future. But in 3.15, this is about 3.15. I don't believe there's anything super duper rare. But you never know. Through the list now and making sure that before we go to live 3.15, that it's all what should be in there. We've got a lot of items, so they're just going through and making sure what ones should be in there are in there, and then we'll go from there. But I don't think there's anything ultra rare right now.
I think the two-handed tractor beam.
The two-handed tractor beam is not supposed to be live, so I don't even think it even works. But yeah, the two-handed tractor beam is not supposed to be live, so that's one thing we will definitely be removing.
I was going on about hinting earlier about the two-handed tractor beam. This is where I was coming from. I unfortunately haven't seen yet. I'm guessing it's on Reddit or one of the Discords or something. Somebody found a two-handed tractor beam in one of the loot boxes. I found those weird fungus creatures that were living amongst the the Railgun magazine in my 400i and one of my most recent playthroughs. I'll put it in the cards at the end of this video. But yeah, I have yet to find something really exotic. I can tell you in the subscriber release, the subscriber vault release this week, they were giving some previews of like different color weapon skins. So I am taking that as the first launch of these only get through loot boxes weapon skins that can be found. So a whole weapon with the paint already on it, so to speak, and you can loot it right from the box. There is some pretty cool stuff. I guess we'll see once they get the Squadron 42 stuff out of there and anything that shouldn't be there, but there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff. And I was finding the boxes in like Platinum Bay. I mean, really weird places in the Acropolis. That was another one at New Babbage. So they're just random places. You could technically just fly around in a very fuel efficient ship and loot boxes. That could be a viable thing to do on the side while you're trying to pull contracts.
Will we be able to create any sort of shareable cargo containers beyond backpacks? Like, can we make ammo crates or medical supplies or boxes with food and drinks? Like, can we make our own loot crates and set it down, kind of stuff?
Not for 3.15. You can't make a crate to buy an empty box and use that in your cargo to store things, and then other people will be able to come and interact with that box. But for 3.15, no.
This is imperative for org operations. I hope to see it soon after 3.15, that we have shared inventory boxes that can be moved in and out of ships and into preferably org hangars. But as we know, we only have persistent rentable hangars for players that are coming in the next few patches. That'll be player owned. At the very least, that's the first step in that direction. And especially if those boxes have passcodes on them where you can lock them up. And then that allows access control to the inside of them unless they're stolen and broken or something. That's the first steps in the way of handling org cargo.
I would say in general, I don't know if specifically the next app, but any plans to...
So there's no, basically the way that they want to have trading between players is obviously going to be a different app. So there is plans to allow you to be in knickknacks and be like, I want to transfer this to someone else, and then it will take them to the player trading app. But I don't think there's anything short term to do that. And when I say short term in terms of 3.15, there's no plans in 3.15 to allow that. But it is a plan that will be done eventually.
This is reiterating another issue that organizations have in MMOs and just friends in general. I can't tell you how many games I've had to travel halfway across the world or universe or game environment just to transfer an item to another player that badly needs it. So being able to have a system to be able to send them something, even if it's for one AUEC or something, without having to physically go there is going to be a huge benefit. Even if it's on a timer or I have to hire NPCs to move it. As long as I can get it done, that's going to be yet another building block for orgs and just for keeping friends sane. I can remember a few times going through this process in a variety of games, but one of them that comes to mind, the biggest, was in BDO, where I had a friend who badly needed some supplies for our Guild Wars, and basically I had to go across the entire map. And you can tell me workers can move things or whatever, but that's a complicated mess, and it did not fulfill what I needed it to do. I needed to move the items to the other player, and it was just a mess. But it's something I remember not so fondly, and yeah, this is something that needs to be fixed. So I'm glad to see that they're going to be working on it.
Many citizens seem to think that the current Magic Toy Box ship is an endgame vision.
Magic Toy Box ship is placeholder. That's it.
I almost feel like that question was a plant by a dev. If so, well played. It's just reiterating that the boxes of storage and all the lockers and suit lockers and weapon lockers of all the different kinds, the kitchens, the cold storage areas, they matter. They will be critical. They are the future, whether we like it or not. There will not be this inventory that you can just open up your personal line of thought and access anything on the ship without having to actually look at it physically. Don't forget cargo areas too will matter, not just in size, but how easy are they to access for the environment you're trying to get into. Some ships, the cargo area is almost an afterthought. It's not near the main entryway. It is good for securing it to stop random players from wandering on your ship quickly and taking random stuff, but it's not so convenient if you're trying to quickly offload multiple goes through the process. I think a lot of ships are going to probably have this redesigned during their Golden Pass process to really think that through. How is the cargo going to physically exit the ship when it needs to be delivered to a location, or it needs to be transferred in an EVA if it needs to go into a situation where it has to be jettisoned because of a pirate's demands? These are all things that are going to have to be visited. I think of the Taurus with its primary storage area easily accessible and its dual tractor beam turret literally pointing right at it to the open space is a good example of a good cargo area for operation.
The hardcore survival rabbit hole are you planning to go? You want us to play with others, yet you are continually adding systems that make me even more fearful to trust other players. How do you? Where are we going with this, and how do you balance that?
Well, I think it's a rock and a hard place in some respects. I think obviously strength in numbers, but then obviously that's the premise, is that you should play together with other people, and then helps you out. But I mean, to answer the question specifically, we've got actor status in terms of eating and drinking. We want the game to be around resources that players can collect. Obviously, homesteads eventually, and those homesteads will be areas that you can store your own things, and obviously we'll have raiding and pirates and all of that kind of thing. So I suppose Chris has a vision in his mind from what he wants Star Citizen to be. Obviously there are elements of games like Valheim and Tarkov and Rust that tie into that, but Star Citizen is its own game, and it will set its own boundaries with how it executes those mechanics. So a good example is eating and drinking. Really in terms of comparisons to other survival games, we're very, very light on eating and drinking. I think it's like 10, 12 hours if you just stood still in the PU before you have to eat anything.
Right.
So if you play Ark, you have to eat every 5 minutes, whereas it's dependent. So I think we want to have those mechanics that we're moving towards, which has always been the intention since way before I even joined Cloud Imperium. I know only now that we're delivering on them. So I think it's a hard answer to talk about, because fundamentally we're still getting everything in there, and the balance will dictate that answer. Because how hardcore do we want to be? Like, it could take me 5 minutes to just change all the data to say you have to drink every half an hour, but that's not the game that we want. We want a game that is more realistic, is probably the wrong word, but a game that's more that is more cohesive to the Star Citizen experience, that you're this space explorer out in the verse, and you've got ships that have all these different functions, and you have beds in there. So eventually we will want players to have tiredness, or we have showers. So do we want hygiene? Well, yeah, that's part of actor status. I think it's on the roadmap.
There's
lots of things that we will add, and we'll go from there.
there's a couple things to dissect there. Chris has always said you take it to the point of realism, and then you bring it back to the point of fun.
I left that in its entirety because it really deserves to be hammered home. Exactly what kind of game Star Citizen is. It is a dangerous game. It is an exciting game. It is a game that you can lose your shirt on, so to speak, at least that play session, and then it'll take time to recover from, especially if you only have a ship or two. But it is also a game that has a lot of reward as well. I don't see it as dangerous as a game like EVE Online, where you lose your entire ship. Basically, if you don't have proper insurance, and insurance is very expensive in EVE, uh, you're literally out everything. Whereas in Star Citizen, you do have relatively cheap insurance. They've said many times already. It's either obviously included with your purchases in the store, or you can purchase it outright on its own, and it's a very minor operating cost addition. So I see it as something that's far less risky. Now, if you go to the riskiest parts of space or whatever, and insurance is not as useful or it's reduced, that's different. But if you're playing the normal game and you're just exploring on your own way, it is going to be forgiving, especially in the alpha and the beta. Basically, everything comes back. It's like, whose line is it anyway? The points don't matter. What matters is your experience with you, your friends, your org mates, and I like that they brought that up. That it's a team game. It's meant to be a team game. It's not as big of a deal when you die if you have friends that can go recover your. You can go back with your friends and go recover your stuff, and you may not be the most courageous person, but you may have some friends who are, or the craziest folks that are just, let's get out there, and you play to the strengths. If you're the king of logistics or the queen of logistics, you play to that strength so your friends can play to theirs. They won't let people mess with you. It's that simple. You'll have friends who have medical facilities on ships, and they will not only save your body, they'll literally regenerate you. This is the type of environment that you will find once you're in an org, and the orgs cost nothing at all. They don't ask for anything from you other than just get out there and get involved. I cannot tell you how many orgs are itching for players right now, and they don't care if you've got an Aurora or a Jav in your hangar, and working off those loners, of course, with a Jav or some other crazy large ship. What matters to them is activity. You don't have to be active every 5 minutes, but just once in a while, log in and go have some fun. Try to find one in your own time zone, by the way, is my only other advice. As for the eating, drinking thing, I think it's a little off kilter. I think it's a little off course. It really doesn't matter right now. Uh, I will say that a lot of ships don't have their eating and drinking facilities working at all, or only partially. Unfortunately, the 300 series had working coffee machine, for example, and now last I checked, the 325A didn't have the cup working. So it was like, what the heck? And that was only if you customize the ship to have that. So we need to see eating and drinking work correctly if they want to actually start adding those statuses, and it matters. So that will be a hard limit. So people will have to pack their own water bottles and energy bars like the old days if they want to live on the side of a moon for a few days, especially with this new inventory system, logging off embeds working, and with the heartbeat system working. We're starting to see the bones be filled in, and the game come alive, and it's very exciting time to be here. Star Citizen is its own identity. It is its own creature, and it is what will make it. And don't forget to give your feedback. Don't forget to get on that issue council and put in if you see a bug or an issue. Don't forget to add feedback. Don't forget to hit up those Q&As on Spectrum when they're available, and ask the right questions so the devs start thinking in meaningful ways about what the issues you're facing as the player. All of that matters because the game is literally being made in front of our eyes, and you're a part of it. I'm a part of it. They're a part of it. This is an exciting time to be in the game. Don't be afraid. Embrace it. Embrace the craziness.
It's people's expectations of what real life is. And I think that's a balance that we want to have, and we want to go for push for as much realism as we can, where it makes sense. And by the way, 10 to 12 hours was 10 to 12 hours of our world time. That's not 10 to 12 hours of in-game time, which is much longer in-game time.
All right. Well, that about does it. Thank you so much, Rich.
This has been a rebroadcast of UE Spat's interview with CIG on New Babbage Radio. I would like to remind listeners that they can view more information about CIG and their Star Citizen game at robertspaceindustries.com, available spectrum-wide. We now return to Nick's greatest hits from the golden oldies of the 2800s. Mainly were based on the pulses of a Dwarf F star in the Nick system. It was truly a weird time for music back then in that area. We're into a bit of overtime here. We've got the Star Citizen Q&A coming up, but I just wanted to cover this week in Star Citizen as well. So this week we've got the Day of the Vara event on the 27th. So we have a few interesting things that are ongoing for that. And then we have another Star Citizen Live, which is pretty dang cool because it'll be covering the outlaw space stations of Pyro, and we'll see a lot of interesting stuff about Pyro that excites me a lot. And that will be on Friday, and they've announced again the time. I recommend, as always, hitting up Twitch version of that if you happen to be able to see it live. It's very cool to capture the energy of the community. You can even ask questions directly on Twitch. If you don't, the YouTube channel is a great source and has very high quality. Basically, the recorded version of the Star Citizen Live. Sometimes that's a little cleaned up if there's some mistakes or issues. Other times they include them. It really doesn't. Either way, you're gonna get the content. Alpha 3.15 has been open to Wave 2 as of today, which is Monday night, which is great. Wave 2 is all subscribers. It's already concierge, and it's people that are more active on the issue council, which is great. I can't wait for more folks to be open. So Wave 3 preferably, or all backers would be preferred very soon. I think because of the active iterative cycle for 3.15 and the goal to have this out the door before the annual sale or during the annual sale, it's been stated multiple times that they were hoping that the patch cycle would be later in the patch cycle would be the annual sale, and that would allow the Ares both of the series and the Redeemer to come in at that point where the A2 would already have been released at the beginning of 3.15 Live. That's why I'm basing it on that factor that they are in top gear trying to get 3.15 to live as soon as possible. The fastest way for them to get that out there is to get as many eyes into the 3.15 PTU and getting those issue council reports out the door and getting more people to experience the content and find all the bugs before it goes live. So Wave 2 is a good sign that we're going in the right direction. The heartbeat system and the restore system, which I covered a little earlier, is active right now. It's been turned on. So this is a very exciting time. The past 48 hours has been a really cool compression time. So if you have access to PTU, I highly encourage you to check it out. Put in the cards my older guide on how to set up the PTU and how to avoid downloading like a 60 gig patch. And just understand, you'll still need to have that storage space on board but there is a way to copy the live files over, and only the changes to from the live to PTU you would have to download. So it'd be a couple gigs, or maybe 10 gigs, 12 gigs versus 60 plus gigs. So that's a nice thing if you want to experience the PTU. And always remember, you can delete the PTU after you're done with it, so you gain that space back. It's only a commitment for a few days or a week or two until the live patch goes. So that's just some feedback in case this is your first run through the patch cycles. And of course, I'll provide content throughout them. Reminder to subscribe. Yeah. Now, with the Q&A, there is a server meshing and persistent streaming Q&A, and you can submit questions now. Please get them in. Please get them in. Please get them in, because that's an important part of the game. And I will have the link below to this thing, but if you want to navigate yourself, it is in the general section of the Spectrum. It is right at the top, pinned, and you can see that there is quite a lot of questions already below. Be sure to upvote the ones that are already your question, because that'll help guarantee it gets there. Encourage your org mates and your friends to also take part in these Q&As. And then when the Q&A shows up and your question's on the board, that's a very exciting time, especially if you have different different issues. As a reminder, server meshing in general and persistence are kind of hand in hand. They are something that is absolutely critical for this game. We're already seeing localized inventory, ship restores. We're seeing being able to log out of beds and come back legitly, come back to the exact same ship you left in a random place. That's all steps in the right direction, but server meshing is going to be much bigger than that. And if we ever want to see more than 50 players on a server, stable, and have giant ships that house up to 20, 30 crew or more, we're going to need proper server meshing and have this persistent streaming. It'll also greatly apply to AI of all the NPCs that are critical to doing everything from bartending to manning your guns to delivering cargo to your ship to defending your ship and your hangar and running things for your org. Your NPCs will be critical, and all of that AI has to be seamless, has to be constantly running in the background and be able to turn itself off when a player is no longer near it and turn into that quanta system that Tony Z outlined very well in previous discussions. So, where it kind of disappears and goes into this nebulous ether where it's not rendered as graphically, but it is running in the background and doing its thinking of what it needs to do. Like a ship that is delivering cargo that's fully NPC run will continue to deliver that cargo, but as a quanta that is not visible any longer until a player's near it. So things like that have to be perfect. And another thing about this is the shard system. So I can't wait to see more information about this and see where all the chips lie. One of the questions below that I really liked was a question about, is an outpost considered at that location on all shards, even when a player is not active in? Because that invites a lot of questions. Can it be attacked and bombed by an A2 on a completely different shard? Does it have to be removed, or is it untouchable in that area? Or is each shard have that exact location of that moon, that asteroid, that planet that is accessible and developable by a player at each one of the different shards? So it's a simple question that needs to be sorted out. I didn't refresh apparently, and now it won't go away. But anyway, what they're encouraging is for you to watch this video about server meshing from the recent CitizenCon. I will include the link below to this. It also is in that also is already in that forum. I would also recommend that you check out right after this. There was a bunch of Twitter posts by one of the game engineers, Chad McKinney, and he covered a lot of interesting stuff that kind of is going to come full circle once it comes time for this Q&A to kind of confirm and officially kind of recognize his positions on these things, and also what was in those CitizenCon as well, kind of rectify everything together. Because I got more out of these simple these answers than I got out of the CitizenCon presentation, which is kind of a shock to me, but that's how it is, unfortunately. Sometimes it works out that way. They focus on a topic that is really important to hammer home, and that's fine, but the things that I was really excited about and the things I really wanted to know more about, like, for example, when the shard density would increase and what their focus was for it to be a regional system, at least right now. So they're focusing more and more on low latency areas. So if you're in North America, if you're in Canada, the United States, you will be able to connect to a specific shard. If you're in Western Europe, you would connect to a different shard, and that would allow you to have the best latency. And these shards would kind of coexist, and you could jump back and forth. But in general, you will be in one or the other. And as Chad McKinney points out here, you won't be locked up to that region, but it would be in your best interest to be in those regions. Another example of this is Oceania. Like if you're in Asia, if you're in Australia, if you're in New Zealand, those type of areas would be best to connect to an Oceania server and not have to face, say, hundreds of milliseconds of latency if they're connecting to a North American server or a European server. That's a good example of what we're talking about here. And I think there's going to be more regional shards as the game grows into a more global phenomena, in order for there to be a good experience around all the different communities that we are seeing grow into Star Citizen. Now, for right now, I think these regional shards make sense. And then over time, they're going to have to figure out how to globalize the entire system. Global shards are going to have tons of, as they pointed out, further R&D and design considerations, but that will probably be something that will come up in the Q&A. And once again, like I mentioned, just a real world, real thing to talk about is an outpost shard wide, or is it globalized where it's across multiple regional shards? That outpost has to be defended. That outpost exists. That outpost denies other people the ability to build next to that valuable resource, or is it something that is regionalized? And that's a very real thing that is coming up very soon in just a few patches. So this is kind of an interesting side, and the discussion here is something you may want to pause the screen and grab for your own discussions and see where you go from there. You can see it's October 11th they were posted, so if you're looking at like the other hours and minutes, I grabbed it at the same time, about minutes apart. So if you're wondering when these were posted, it was October 11th these were valid. And I trust Chad McKinney as a source. I think these are not leaks. These are literally posted them live. He just is answering random questions on Twitter. So that's him. And I will also include the video below. So between pausing the video and grabbing this and watching that video, you can probably build yourself a discussion about where you want to support via upvoting and have your own questions and for the questions and answers for this server discussion. And I would say that this is a very, very important thing, because the future of Star Citizen is right here in the details. And if you ever want to see bigger than 50 player service, we need to see hundreds of players in a server reliably without 30Ks constantly. And we need to have AI that is able to be supported as well on top of those hundreds of players at all times. So this is very exciting stuff, and this is something that needs to be seamless. But I trust the teams that are out there, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I think Chris and Sandy said there was like 700 plus people in the last interview they gave. I trust those engineers. I trust those developers. I trust the teams to have that ability to be able to overcome these incredible, incredible things. We are truly setting a new standard on what a AAA MMO can be in a space sim. And that's pretty cool to have a front row seat to. Have faith. Keep asking the right questions and keep supporting it. And remember to keep kicking into the issue council issues that you're finding. If you do have the kindness to jump into the PTU and check out 3.15, be sure to jump in there. Heck of fun. And if you're in there, be sure to hit me up. Red J, I'm the same name there. Or on Discord, redj #0001.